Shalom, my name is Joseph Shulam. We're continuing the study of the weekly portion of the reading of the Torah with BRADTV. I am encouraged by seeing the responses that are coming on BRADTV for this study of the Torah. It's unusual. Jews read the Torah already for thousands of years, and in 1 year, the Torah is read publicly in every synagogue from beginning to end. We started a few weeks ago with the portion of Genesis, and then we went to the portion of Noach, and then we went to the portion of Abraham, Lech Lecha, from Genesis chapter 12, and then we are in Vayera. Abraham continues with the circumcision and then with the sacrifice of his son Isaac in chapter 22. And now we are in a portion that's called in Hebrew Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. We're in chapter 23 of the book of Genesis from verse 1. And the first thing we find out that Sarah dies old. She dies at 127 years of age. This was the life of Sarah. That's the first verse of chapter 23 of Genesis. Now, Sarah was the matriarch. She came with Abraham from Babylon to Assyria, then to the land of Canaan, and went through all the ordeals and the tests and the issues together with Abraham and his camp in the land of Canaan. So she is the matriarch of our faith, just like Abraham is the father of faith. She is the mother of faith because she, like Abraham, walked with the Lord. Even though everybody makes mistakes, and Abraham made mistakes, and Sarah made mistakes, but they walked with the Lord and they became models of faith, of hospitality, of hope, of tenacity, not giving up no matter what. And now Abraham is faced with the need to bury his wife. Now I want you to remember, the promise that God made to anyone more times than any other promise is the promises that he made to Abraham. And from the promises they made to Abraham, 2 of them are repeated. One is repeated 7 times, and that is that he's going to give him a seed from Sarah, a legal seed that will carry on all the promises that God gave him. The second promise that is repeated in the Bible more times even than the 7 times that the seed promise appears to Abraham is the promise of the land. In the whole Torah, it's repeated more than 20 times. In the book of Genesis alone, it's repeated several times. So, the land, God tells Abraham in chapter 15 of Genesis, walk throughout the land. Wherever you walk, it will be yours. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give you the land of the Canaanites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and the Hittites. Oh, big promise. Now Sarah dies. She gave birth to Isaac when she was 92 years old. She dies. Abraham doesn't own 1 inch of the land. He has no land. He's a sojourner, a foreigner, a tourist in the land that God gave him as an everlasting inheritance, as an everlasting possession. and now he's got to find a place to bury his wife. I want you to understand the dilemma that we are facing as Bible students, and the dilemma that Abraham faced in reality. See, God promised. He promised to give him a seed, and it took many years of waiting, crying, praying, repeating, saying, God, I'm going to die an old man, and I still don't have a seed. And Eliezer, my old servant, is going to inherit me. That's chapter 15, where Abraham, it says, and Abraham believed God, and God reckoned to him as righteousness. A very important text also for the New Testament. So now Sarah dies, and not 1 inch of land is his legal, private possession. You have to have a lot of faith in God. You have to have a lot of relationship with God to be able to sustain the stress of having promises, repeated promises that God is going to give you the land. And the land borders are given to him. And several different borders actually were given to him, from Dan to Beersheba, from the rivers in the north, from the Euphrates and the Tigris in the north to the river of Egypt. And different borders are given to Abraham in the book of Genesis. But yet, not 1 inch of land is his possession. But he's got to bury his wife. I'm going to read from the beginning of chapter 23. For a few verses, just to put you into the picture. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron. Actually, today, dear brothers and sisters, we have 2 cities adjacent one to the other. One is a Jewish city called Kiryat Arba, like the text here in Genesis, and the Arab is predominantly Palestinian Arab, hostile to Israel and hostile to Jews, Hebron. So Kiryat Arba is the Hebrew name of Hebron. So they lived there, right next to Hebron, by the oaks of Mamre, where the camp of Abraham was. And Sarah dies. He's got to find somebody to sell him a piece of land. So he goes downtown. Hebron was a Hittite city. The Hittites actually came from the center mountains of Anatolia, Turkey of today. Right on top of the mountain, they had their capital, Hattusa. Archaeological digs have been carried on, and still new digs are being carried on just as we speak right now. That's where the Hittites came from. And in the New Testament, that part of the country is called Asia Minor. So Abraham comes to Hebron, goes downtown, among the sons of Chet, the Hittites. And these are his words, verse 4 of chapter 23. I am a foreigner, a stranger among you. Give me property to bury for a burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. I mean, I can picture, I've been to Hebron literally hundreds and hundreds of times. Inside and outside, on the Jewish side, on the Arab side, in the marketplace, in the Kasbah of Hebron. In fact, 2 years ago, we almost got kidnapped by the Palestinian terrorists. We were in the Arab side, inside the Kasbah, and we almost got kidnapped. Luckily, we were smart enough to get away from there and avoid being kidnapped. So, dangerous place even today. So the sons of Het are sitting there. I can picture them sitting in the coffee shop there, drinking coffee, smoking their nargila, their water pipe, and talking. And there comes this Abraham, stranger, old man, older than 100 years old, says, my wife died. I need to find a place to bury her. And I want to buy a place. The Hittites are not stupid. Hear us, my Lord. Ephron the Hittite says to Abraham, hear us, my Lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you his burial place, that you may bury your dead. Oh, wow. It's so Middle East, even today. Even today, if I go now in the old city, in Jerusalem, and visit some of my friends, then I want to buy something from them. I can give you their names. I can give you the shops. I want to buy something. Not cheap. Maybe some archaeological artifact. Maybe a glass jar, from the time of Jesus. Beautiful. Complete, not broken. And I want to buy it as a gift, let's say for my wife. The merchant that knows me for many years would say, Joseph, what's between me and you? We are friends, we are brothers. Take it to your wife. Share it as a gift from me and you together for your wife. I have to negotiate backwards and forwards to get the deal where I can legally pay for it and not feel obligated or indebted to my friend. That's the situation here. If you want to learn business in the Middle East, you have to learn it from our Arab neighbors, friends, and sometimes brothers in the faith. So the Hittite Ephron tells to him, well, you're a prince among us. Realize Abraham has a huge encampment right outside of Hebron. When I say huge, remember that in chapter 14 of Genesis, he had 318 soldiers between the age of 20 to 50 that went up chasing after the kings of the north to rescue Lot and his family that were captured and taken up to the north past Damascus. So if you have an encampment with 318 soldiers, and they're between the age of 20 and 50, likely they're married, likely they have at least one child, they're a camp of over 1,000 people. And he was an evangelist. Those are the souls which he made in Haran. To make souls in Hebrew is to evangelize. La'asot nefashot is what missionaries do in Hebrew. So, we're giving you the place. You choose where you want to bury your wife. It's yours. You can bury your wife there. But Abraham knows the Middle East well. He knows the people of this land, the different 7 or 8 different nations that live here and jockey with one another and compete with one another and fight with one another. Nothing new is in this place of between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, the land of Israel. Abraham heard the very magnanimous offer. Take any place you want to bury. And he has to be magnanimous himself. So in verse 7 of chapter 23, it says, Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Het, and he spoke to them, saying, if it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, listen to me, and meet with Ephron the son of Zohar for me, and he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field, let him give it to me in full price as property for a burial place among you. What do we learn about Abraham here that is very important for us today, especially for our generation, my generation, maybe even the younger generation? Abraham, before he went to negotiate with the Hittites, he already knew exactly what he wants. He knew who the owner of the field is. He knew who the owner of the cave is. He already knew what the right price of it is. And he already focused. He did his homework well. He focused on what he needs to do. So he says, I want you, the sons of Het, the community of the Hittites in Hebron, to influence Ephron. He's right there. Ephron is right there with them. To influence Ephron and to, help me to convince him to sell me the cave of Machpelah at the end of his field, specific place, specific product, and I'm willing to pay full price. That is a tempting offer by Abraham to the sons of Het, to Ephron. I'm willing to pay first price, because in the Middle East you're never willing to pay full price. We haggle. But Abraham is a gentleman, and he knows the character, and he understands the implications of what will happen if he asks for a discount, and what would happen after he bought the field and the cave, and after he died, what would happen. So he's not willing to pay less than what the whole community witnesses. It's not a deal between him and Ephron. It's a deal that he does publicly with the Hittite community in Hebron. I'm willing to pay full price. Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Het, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham. Ephron was right there with the people. He answered Abraham, No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you. Bury your dead. In other words, Ephron says, I'm giving you the field free. In front, you have all these witnesses, the sons of Het, the community of the Hittites in Hebron. They're witnesses. It's yours. Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land again, a second time, and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. In other words, I'm not going to take it as a gift. I will pay for it. Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My Lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekel of silver. What is it between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron. To make the story short, Abraham pays the 400 pieces of silver for that cave. Now, why is this so important? Because we have 3 different occasions in which this cave plays an important role. First of all, the burial of Sarah, which is here in chapter 23 of Genesis. And then we have it again in chapter 25 of, still in our portion, in our reading portion. When Abraham dies, we read in chapter 25, verse 9, and his sons of Abraham, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Het. There Abraham was buried with Sarah, his wife. In other words, the whole story is captured again, capsuled in 3 verses in chapter 25 when Abraham dies. The purchase of the cave becomes an important motive in understanding Abraham's character, the character of the inhabitants of the land of that time. And this thing is repeated again when Jacob dies. Before he dies, he makes Joseph and his sons swear. I'm reading from chapter 49 of Genesis, verses 29 to 32. Bury me with my fathers in the cave, in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave, the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. The point that we see in the burial of Sarah and in the burial of Abraham himself by his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and then Jacob, his grandson, who is in Egypt. He dies in Egypt. And he makes his children swear that they're going to take him back from Egypt to the land of Canaan and bury him in the cave that was purchased from Ephron the Hittite. That's in Genesis 49, verses 49 verses 29 to 32. There must be something very significant with this cave. Why? Because Abraham bought it with money, full price that was asked, without negotiation, in public in front of the sons of Het in the Hebron. A purchase deed that this land belongs to him. He paid for it. It's very important. We are here now in the land of Israel, essentially at a war that lasted more than 100 years already, with the Arabs who call themselves Palestinians, and it's overland. Not only overland, but it's also overland. We need to learn from Abraham, our father, on this issue. We need to learn a principle from this text. All great change is the work of one generation, especially in the Middle East. And none of us will live to see the full fruit of our work, of our endeavors. This statement is made by one great rabbi, ex-chief rabbi of Great Britain. None of us actually finish the work that we started. We depend on the next generation, especially when we're talking about spiritual work, especially when we're talking about, building a community based on biblical principles and on faith in God and in Yeshua HaMashiach in the land of Israel. The next generation will see the fruit of the seed that you have planted in your youth. And I can tell you about Nativia. This is the situation. I am already an old man. Soon I'm going to be, in a few months, 76 years old. I started this ministry when I was in my 20s. And now the next generation that was born and raised here, and even the grandchildren of people that I taught and discipled, are the leadership. And they're doing a much better job than I do. And so we are still continuing a second session for the portion of the Torah that's called the life of Sarah, Chayei Sarah, that starts in Genesis 23 verse 1, ends in Genesis 25 verse 18 with the death and the burial of Abraham. But I only covered chapter 23, so I want to cover the rest of this week's portion. The life of Sarah, that starts in Genesis 23:1 and ends in Genesis 25:18. And I want to go to the second important text of this portion of the Torah. And that is Abraham's biggest worry. He waited for decades, literally for decades, for God to fulfill His promise, and he waited till Sarah was 90 years old. And he was 100 years old when God finally kept His promise and gave Abraham a seed from Sarah, Isaac. Sarah laughed. In Yitzchak in Hebrew means to laugh. Sarah laughed when she heard the angel say, "Oh, you will have a child." She said, "I am already finished my career as a woman that can bear children. And you're telling me that I will have a child?" She laughed. She had doubts. It was funny for her that she, at the age of 90, will have a child. But she does. Isaac is born. He's 40 years old. Still not married. In the ancient world, that was very strange. Now, why was he not married? In the former portion, not in Chayei Sarah, in Vayera, we find out that Sarah wants to kick out Hagar and Ishmael. Hagar was her handmaid for years. She gave Hagar to Abraham to have a son, and Ishmael is born from Abraham and Hagar. And now Sarah has a son, her own son, and she wants Hagar and Ishmael to be kicked out. And she tells Abraham, Abraham says, no way. And then God intervenes. I like that very much. And says, Abraham, listen to your wife Sarah. Kick out Hagar and Ishmael. And the question is, why did Sarah want? She wasn't the mean woman. Why did she want to kick out Ishmael? Because she saw Ishmael playing around with Isaac. Last week's portion. Sarah is concerned for the development of Isaac as a man, because this phrase, playing around with, is a sexual phrase. Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph with playing around, the same word, letzachek, same root as Isaac, letzachek. So Ishmael was metzachek with Isaac, played around with Isaac. Sarah sees it, and she says, no, this boy, Ishmael and his mother are getting out of here. We don't want them around here. But now we are in the next portion in Chayei Sarah, and we find out in chapter 24 that Abraham is very worried. Before he was worried that he doesn't have a son. Now he's worried he has a son, but his son is still not married at the age of 40. So he says, let's bring a wife from there, from our family up north, for Isaac also. So he gives instruction to his old servant, and he loads him up with camels, with goods, with cloth from Egypt, with gold, with silver, with bracelets. We hear about this in chapter 24. And this camel caravan with this old man Eliezer go up north to find a bride for Isaac. And old wise man Eliezer devises a test. He says, if I meet any girl, I'm going to test her to see what quality she is. So he goes to the well where the shepherd girls come with the flocks, and he sees this beautiful girl. He doesn't know yet who she is. And he says, young lady, let me drink. And in his mind, the test was, if she says, I will draw water for you to drink from the well, but I will also draw water for your caravan, for your camels, this would be the right girl. It shows that she's thinking, that she's considerate, that she cares about people, and she cares about the animals, and she's a shepherd girl, a working girl. that's the kind of wife I want for Isaac. And she's very young. So he gets to the well outside of Haran, and he sees this beautiful girl. It says like that, verse 16 of chapter 24. Now the young woman was very beautiful to behold, a virgin. No man had known her. And she went down to the well, filled her pitcher, water that means, and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your pitcher. And she said, drink, my lord. Then she quickly let her pitcher down to her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also, until they had finished drinking. Wow! I had that test, and this girl passed the test. Wow! The first girl he meets. But it also happens to be that she's family. She's from Sarah's family. So she gives drink to the camel, and when they finish drinking, the old man takes out a golden nose ring weighing half a shekel. Half a shekel would be, I would guess, like half an ounce, maybe more, maybe an ounce, of pure gold. And he says, whose daughter are you? And she tells him. And she invites him to her father's house to lodge. And the old servant of Abraham goes there, and he negotiates for Rebekah. And the negotiation goes on, and Laban is not going to let him go with Rebekah until he gets all the gold and all the gifts and all the silver and all the wealth that Eliezer brings with him as a dowry. Laban wants to get it, so he's holding the old man up. And then in verse 49 of chapter 24, now the old man is getting worried, and is being delayed. He wants to take Rebekah back to the land of Canaan, to the house of Isaac. And this is what Eliezer says to Laban. Now, if you will deal with me kindly and truly, and deal with my master kindly and truly, tell me. If not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left hand, that I want to go somewhere else. Find somebody else. If you are fooling around, playing with me, and delaying me, and delaying me, and delaying me, and you're not letting me take the girl to the land of Canaan to marry Isaac, then let me know. But the phrase that is using here in the English, deal with me kindly and truly, with my master and with me. Now this phrase in the Hebrew text is chesed ve'emet. Translated normally grace and truth. But in the Hebrew Bible, the phrase, exact phrase, grace and truth, appears at least 20 times. In the Psalms and in the historical writings and in the Proverbs, and appears at least 20 times. This is actually the first time that it appears in the Bible, in our portion, Chayei Sarah, chapter 24, verse 49. Why is this so important, folks? It's so important because we have this text that is totally misunderstood by Christians, and the text appears in the Gospel of John, chapter 1. It appears in verse 17. Grace and truth. Charis kai aletheia in Greek. And in the Hebrew it appears 20 times in the Old Testament. But never in the English King James, and I don't know about the Koreans. I apologize for my Korean brothers and sisters. I don't read Korean. It never appears in the Old Testament the exact same way, same translation as in John chapter 1 verse 17. And why? The text says like this in chapter 1, John 1:17. The law was given through Moses, and grace and truth came from Jesus Christ. That's verse 17 of John chapter 1. So the Christian translators were thinking, how could grace and truth exist in the Old Testament 20 times, in the Torah several times, when grace and truth came from Jesus Christ? And so before Jesus Christ, there cannot be any grace and truth in the Old Testament. But there is. Chesed ve'emet, there is. But already in the Septuagint, that is a pre-Christian translation to Greek, already then they played with the translation. Either then or sometimes in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century AD. The Hebrew is still the Hebrew. They couldn't play with the Hebrew. What does it mean? Grace and truth came from, not through, like the law came from, through Moses. It wasn't his. He was an agent of the law. But grace and truth, the source of grace and truth, came from Jesus Christ. That's what John tells us. But what is grace and truth doing here? Grace and truth means, if you deal with me graciously and fairly, truthfully, then let me know. And in Psalms, it appears in several Messianic Psalms as well. But grace and truth are two conflicting elements. If I go to the market now over here in Machne Yehuda in Jerusalem, and I want to buy a kilo of walnuts, and I pay for a kilo, and I get a kilo, that's true. That's true weight and fair dealing. However, if the merchant likes me and he puts in the bag not 1 kilo, I pay for 1 kilo, but he gives me 1 kilo 100 grams bonus, that's grace. You can't have grace and truth coexisting at the same time, on the same occasion, except in Jesus Christ. Because in Him, God's grace and God's truth are embedded in His pre-existence to the creation of the world. They are embedded in God's program for redemption of mankind. They're embedded in the character and in the mission of the Messiah that comes to fulfill our lack, our shortcoming by His grace, and therefore pays the full price for our redemption as human beings. It's a big topic. I don't want to carry on this topic. Maybe I'll give a lesson on another occasion in BRADTV dealing with this issue. But for now, read the Word of God. Every week we tell you what will be read in every synagogue, and read the Word of God. The next portion starts actually in chapter 25 of Genesis, verse 19. And again, it's a very, very important portion, and it's called Toldot, the history, the genealogy of Isaac, or the history of events with Isaac. Starts in chapter 25, verse 18. I suggest that you read from chapter 23, verse 1, and finish at chapter 25, verse 18. And keep up this way. You will read most of the Bible during the year. God bless all of you, and bless BRADTV for broadcasting these teachings from Jerusalem. God bless you. Shalom.